The decision comes as the Fed tries to navigate waves of economic uncertainty.
First, the impact of the war with Iran. The conflict has already caused crude oil, gas, jet fuel, and home heating oil prices to soar. Another factor is the future of tariffs. This is the first interest rate decision since the Supreme Court struck down many of President Donald Trump's sweeping country-based tariffs.
Let's bring in NBC News business and economy reporter Ali Canal. Ali, so Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell spoke just a short time ago, made some headlines. He talked about the Fed's decision. He also talked about his own future.
Yeah, he did say that he will remain on the Fed board until that DOJ investigation into him is ultimately concluded. So that's something that we heard from him, the press conference still ongoing. He also spoke a lot about uncertainty right now and how no one really knows what's going on with the economy, especially when it comes to the outlook. We knew going into this decision that the Fed would keep interest rates steady. We also got updated projections from the Fed. This maps out where policymakers think interest rates could head in the future. The majority think that we are going to see one rate cut this year. However, there was a lot more dispersion. There's a lot more split opinions and thoughts. Some thought maybe we won't see any rate cuts this year, and I think that speaks to a lot of this uncertainty. I want to play a little bit of what Jerome Powell just said at that presser.
In the near term, higher energy prices will push up overall inflation, but it is too soon to know the scope and duration of the potential effects on the economy. The U.S. economy is doing, pretty well. It's just we don't know what the effects of this will be, and really no one does.
No one knows. So ultimately, this is going to be a wait and see type of time for the Fed until they figure out what comes next.
And Ali, there was also some other data on wholesale prices appearing to rise. What could that mean for inflation?
Yeah, so wholesale prices, this is what businesses pay each other before ultimately deciding what gets passed on to the consumer. And that was higher than expected. 0.7% on a month-over-month basis. The expectation was closer to 0.3%. And that pushes wholesale inflation above 3%. Now, the Fed's target is to bring inflation down to 2%. So we still have a long way to go here. And this happened before the war with Iran. So very likely we're going to see even higher prices, not just for gas, but also fertilizer and food at the grocery store.
And to that end, the administration today announced some new measures that they want to take to try to reduce prices on oil. What did they say?
Yeah, a lot of different measures here, essentially trying to add more supply, maybe ease some of the bottleneck effects. One is the U.S. is now going to allow companies to buy oil from Venezuela again, which could bring more crude onto that global market. Although I will say that it's very difficult to refine Venezuelan oil, and the infrastructure is lacking there as well. So that's really just a drop in the bucket when it comes to the larger infrastructure and the larger supply that we had going through the Strait of Hormuz. The president also suspending something called the Jones Act for 60 days. Now, this is a law that typically requires fuel ships between U.S. ports to travel on American ships. This will now allow foreign ships to transfer some of that oil. And then finally, we are seeing the administration engage more heavily with a lot of these oil industry executives. So J.D. Vance and Energy Secretary Chris Wright met with the American Petroleum Institute as they look for additional ways to potentially bring down prices.
All right, Ali Canal, thank you so much.
Of course.
Turning now to another top story and the war with Iran.
Iran confirms another high-ranking official in its government is dead after an Israeli airstrike. Iran's intelligence chief became the latest member of the regime to be killed in the war.
Today in Tehran, state media showed mourners gathered in the streets for the funeral of Iran's national security chief and de facto leader who was killed in an Israeli airstrike on Tuesday. Iran is also saying today that airstrikes have hit a major oil and gas field near the Persian Gulf in the largest attack on the country's energy infrastructure since the war began.
NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley joins us now from Tel Aviv. Matt, there is quite a bit happening right now between Israel, Iran, the killing of Iran's intelligence chief, and there are also strikes today on Iranian energy infrastructure. What should we know about that and how Iran is responding?
Well, we've been seeing this attack on Iranian energy infrastructure for quite a few weeks. Today, the Iranians said that they were going to be now targeting energy infrastructure belonging to some of those Gulf countries near Iran, near the UAE. This is something, of course, that we've been kind of seeing the whole time, which makes these threats from both of them really not clear that it's going to actually change anything on the ground. Because the fact is that even if energy is targeted, the Strait of Hormuz has been completely blocked. So energy oil, gas, is going to struggle if it's able to leave and go to other markets, if at all. So the situation there in terms of fighting and in terms of targeting infrastructure, probably not going to have a real mark on the full holistic view of this war.
And Matt, we're learning some new information about the UN's nuclear watchdog regarding Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium. What do we know about that?
Yeah, the IAEA, the international watchdog for basically affairs of nuclear materials and products, has said that there is some of this nuclear highly enriched uranium that is underneath the Bushehr plant. Now, this is something that we had heard from Araghchi. He's the foreign minister of Iran, saying that a lot of the remaining nuclear material is now buried underneath all of these mounds of detritus that were left after those U.S. bombings of Iranian nuclear sites back last June. So, we're still, of course, seeing a lot of targeting, and there are still a lot of questions about where this nuclear material is, despite these assurances from the IAEA. This is one of the main targets going forward. Where are they thought to be about 440 kilograms of highly enriched uranium?
All right, Matt Bradley for us. Matt, thank you so much.
A California mother accused of murdering her daughter was back in court today for the first time in months.
Ashley Buzzard did not appear at her last two scheduled court hearings. She said she was sick. Back in December, she was arrested and charged with killing 9-year-old Melody Buzzard, her daughter. Melody was last seen in October after going on a road trip with her mom. Her body was found 2 months later in a rural area of Utah.
NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson joins us now and is tracking this story. Steve, there was some drama leading up to what was supposed to be a pretty routine hearing. How did we get here?
The drama all about whether or not Ashley Buzzard would show up to this latest court hearing, which, as you mentioned, and by the way, was scheduled all the way back in February 11th. She misses that hearing. Then there's another scheduled for March 4th. She misses that hearing. Both cases, she's citing an illness, saying that she simply cannot come to court to those hearings. Prosecutors then want to file what's called a motion of extraction. Essentially, the judge would compel Buzzard to appear in court through legal means. The judge himself says that he wants to do that if she didn't show up to this meeting. And remember, Buzzard was uncooperative with the investigation during the time that Melody Buzzard was missing, and for that reason, prosecutors really focused and dialed in on her not appearing to these hearings. All of that, though, moot because she did appear in court later on or earlier today, which sort of renders all of this, again, a moot point for what really amounted to a status hearing about later court dates, guys.
And so, Steve, where does all this go from here?
Yeah, preliminary hearing is next. By all accounts, that was supposed to happen no later than April 30th. That may now move to May, based upon what was said in court and discussed about there being a little bit of a push for a preliminary hearing in May. Beyond that, no trial date set just as of yet, as they're still going through, again, all of these processes, including some evidence that may be introduced during these hearings, guys.
Steve Patterson.